Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's explainer. For a long time now, we've been so used to artificial intelligence acting as this massive, almost brute force data processor. It just ingests a ton of information and spits out patterns. But today, we're exploring a massive, fundamental shift. We're talking about the transition from that basic, kind of parrot-like pattern matching into a mature, reasoning machine. Let's look at the evolution of machine wisdom itself.
I want to start by asking you the exact Socratic question posed by our source today. What happens when a model trains on data that remembers? Normally, data is just, well, it's a static scrapshot, right? It's a string of text or maybe a number in a spreadsheet. But what if that data actually carries its own history and context in a continuous cycle? Think about that for a second. When a model is trained on this rich contextualized data that literally remembers, the very fundamental nature of how that model learns begins to change.
The answer, it learns judgment. Up until now, our systems have been absolutely incredible at just running the math, but processing data is not the same as judging it. Judgment means actually inspecting the nuance and the quality of the information, kind of like a jeweler carefully inspecting a gem under a magnifying glass. By training on data that remembers, we are finally moving past mere retrieval. The machine starts to actually evaluate the world rather than just reciting it back to us.
And this brilliantly illustrates the concept of machine wisdom. Now, to be clear, this isn't some airy philosophical concept. It's a highly practical capability defined right here in our source. Machine wisdom is simply the ability to recognize which signals deserve stronger weight and which require caution. Think about how you operate as an expert in your own field. You don't treat every single piece of information equally, do you? You know a peer-reviewed study carries way more weight than some random internet comment. You naturally proceed with caution when a source is shaky. Well, now the machine is developing this exact same critical filtering mechanism. It's learning what to trust.
Historically, AI has totally suffered from what we call forcing certainty. It basically charges ahead blindfolded, hallucinating answers just because it thinks it absolutely must give you a response. But machine wisdom? That develops self-awareness around uncertainty. Instead of confidently walking right off a cliff, it holds up a lantern, it pauses to evaluate, and it actually tells you when its confidence is low. Just imagine the absolute relief of working with a tool that simply says, "Hey, I'm not entirely sure about this," instead of confidently leading you down the wrong path.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it breaks down internal logic. A system lacking judgment relies on a weak analogy. It basically builds conclusions like a flimsy house of cards by linking things that really shouldn't be linked. But a wise machine, it grounds its answers in reliable precedent. It genuinely understands structural integrity, making sure that the foundational logic of its output is tested and as solid as a stone pillar.
So let's look at how this actually changes your daily workflow. Think about all the mental energy you expend right now constantly double-checking your AI tools. You're basically acting as a supervisor to a very fast, very eager, but sometimes totally naive intern. When the machine finally possesses judgment, that entire dynamic flips. Your interaction transforms from this tedious, cautious supervision into genuine, high-level collaboration.
So, the crucial point is this absolute before and after journey for you, the user. In the past, you were stuck receiving blind outputs. You fed in a prompt and you got a black box response you couldn't trace at all. You were essentially gambling with the algorithm. But now, you start receiving informed reasoning. You get an output that has weighed its own internal confidence, evaluated the precedent, exercised caution where necessary, and delivered a really reasoned conclusion. Guys, it's literally the difference between shaking a magic 8-ball and consulting a seasoned expert.
So, what is the actual catalyst for this shift? Our source points to Codatta, which you can check out at app.codatta.io, as the engine really driving this evolution. They are taking on blind AI through two essential ingredients. First, they're giving models data with built-in confidence. The data itself acts like a shield against unreliability, straight up telling the model how trustworthy it is. Second, they are providing data provenance. This means leaving a clear footprint to trace exactly where the data came from, who created it, and its historical reliability. By embedding confidence and provenance directly into the training layer, Codatta is essentially building the infrastructure for real machine judgment.
Which leaves us with this incredibly powerful concluding thought from the text. That's how machines inherit wisdom, not just patterns. We have finally moved beyond the era of the glorified pattern-matching parrot. We are entering an era where our tools inherit the very essence of discerning judgment. And so, as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative question to chew on. When you are finally working side by side with a machine that has inherited true wisdom, that understands its own uncertainty and relies on informed reasoning, what new, previously impossible heights will your own human potential reach?
Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.